Alright, so welcome back. We're in our second tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to set up the character movement component. We can adjust the jump height, things like that, and we're going to set up the initial crouch animations. So before we get started, if you're watching this video, chances are you're not subscribed because 99% of you are not subscribed. And that's a pretty bad number. So if you like this one, be sure to click on that sub or thanks button below. Speaking of thanks, huge shout out to Miss Mo Davis and Tammy the Psychic. Thank you so much for being channel members. If you want to support the channel and get shout outs in videos like this, click on that join button below. Whew. So now that we're done with that, let's jump into the video itself. Let's go ahead and open up our third-person controller. We'll open up our blueprint and see where we have our BP third-person character. That is everything to do with our character and movement system. We can see on the left-hand side, these are all the components. And in the viewport, we can see what those components are. So if we click on our capsule, we can see that this is our collider. If we click on this arrow, we'll see that that just shows the direction we're pointing forward. If we click on the mesh, we'll see that this is our character mesh. The camera boom is how far behind the camera is. For example, if we change the target arm length from 400 a little closer, we can hit the play button, and now our camera is closer to the player. And if we were to move it further away, it would go further away. Same with the follow camera itself. This is where we can adjust the settings for the camera, such as the aspect ratio. If we wanted to make sure that it was 16:9 at all times, and we hit compile, then when we hit play, we would get these bars on the left and right hand side to ensure that it is a 16:9 game stream, or game screen. So yeah, that's an easy way to set the ratio, but we're going to go ahead and uncheck that. So constrain aspect ratio off. And then you can also adjust post-processing effects if you'd like to here, things like color grading, bloom, exposure, all that good stuff. We'll get into these settings later on, but I just kind of wanted to go over what you can do in all these components. And then finally, the character movement component. This is where we're going to actually set up the crouch animation and things like that, as well as dashing and movement speed, all things like that. So let's go ahead and look through and see what we have. So we have gravity scale. If I set this to 1 instead of 1.75, we can take a look at what happens in the game. So if I jump, we go a lot higher, and it takes longer to get down. If I change gravity scale to 2 and hit compile, then it feels a bit more realistic. So depending on the kind of game you're making, you may want to adjust the gravity scale. If you're on another planet where you want to be jumping really, really high, maybe you set this to like 0.5 or something silly like that. And when we hit play, we're just really floating around and stuff. So we can run and jump and say like, whoa, where are we going? Things like that. So lots of stuff you could do with gravity, but we're going to go ahead and set that to 2 because that felt pretty good in terms of realistic jumping and falling. You can also change the jump acceleration. So if we scroll down, we can see jumping and falling, and you can change the jump velocity. So if I change this to 100 instead of 700, we're going to have a very, very tiny jump. Just, whoa, that's about as high as you could jump. And if we change this to 1,000 and hit compile, we'll still be constrained by the same gravity, but we'll have a much higher jump. So there's lots of ways you can adjust that and get a good feel in your game. I'm going to go ahead and change the velocity back to, let's say, 700 or 800. Now, we said we wanted to get crouch and dash working, so let's go ahead and set those up. For the crouch, we can see that we have a crouched half height here. That is going to be 40 centimeters, and you might be saying, wow, they already have crouch built in. Well, that's true and not true at the same time. So let's go ahead and click on our capsule component and turn off hidden in game. That way, when we play the game, you can actually see what's happening with the capsule, and we can see that the capsule is right here. Now, let's go into our event graph and create some code for crouching and uncrouching. We already have an input action for jump, so now we need to make one for crouching. Let's go to third person, input, and actions. Let's create a new input action by right-clicking and choosing input and choosing an input action. We're going to name this IA_crouch. That way, whenever we want the event crouch to run, it's going to run this, and we won't have to actually set the input keys. To do the input keys, we're going to go back up one level and go to IMC default. This is the input mapping context where we'll actually tell it what that button should do. So let's go ahead and add a mapping for this. We see we have jump, move, and look. I'm going to go ahead and add a new mapping and choose crouch. If we open up crouch, we can see that we can choose which keys will be enabled for crouch. So I want the control key to be crouch. So we're going to click on this and hit the control button, and you'll see that it chooses left control. We can also click on the drop down and actually choose manually which key we want to use, but left control is what I want to use, so we'll save that. We'll also save this character, and let's create a new event for that input action. So let's right click and type crouch. And you'll see that we have an event for input action crouch. Let's click on that. Now we see we have a few features here. So let's go ahead and drag off of started. So that's going to be when we actually press the key down. And we're going to type crouch. And we'll just choose crouch here. And then for completed, we're going to type uncrouch. Now let's go ahead and go to the character movement component and type in crouch. You can see that we have a variable for can crouch. Let's set this to true, compile, and test this out. Now, when we hit control, our collider gets much smaller, and when we let go, it's much larger, and you can see that we're actually running at a faster speed. So when I hit control, we're crouching and walking. When I let go, our speed goes back up to our running speed. So what's happening here? Well, the component, the movement component, is fully supporting our crouch mechanic. We can even set how tall the crouched character is by going to our character movement. And you can see crouched half height here. And you can actually adjust from 40, 80, whatever height you want to actually set the character to be when they're crouched. So this is working properly, but we've never actually input any animations for the character itself. So while the component is working as expected, and we can definitely crouch under objects, our animation simply isn't following. So we're going to download some animations to enable this. And generally when I add anything to a project, I like to save all and close the project, because Unreal Engine does a really good job of importing and clearing assets as soon as you load a project. So we want to actually close everything out and make sure that it's going to import the assets as expected. So what we want to do is head over to the marketplace, and you're going to search for animation starter pack. And you'll see that Epic Games has an animation starter pack that comes with a ton of animations for characters holding weapons, including rifles, handguns, and more importantly, crouching. So that'll be a good one for us. Let's go ahead and add this to our project. If your project doesn't show up, just go ahead and click on Show All Projects and find it that way, because this will be for 5.3 and the latest version of the asset pack is for 5.2. But don't worry about that. We can definitely still use the assets. They work just fine. We'll hit Add to Project. Great. So now it's in our project and we can open it up again. So for this video, we've gotten crouch working, and I wanted to get the dash or sprint working as well, because that's directly involved with the movement controller. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the sprint in this tutorial, and then in the next video, we're going to set up all those animations and the state machines to enable those as well. So let's go ahead and try that out. Let's go to our third-person controller. Let's go to Input and Actions, and we're going to create a new input action by right-clicking, choosing Input, and then Input Action, and type IA_sprint. Let's go ahead and go back to Input and open up our Input Mapping Context object, and we're going to add a new mapping for Sprint. So now we can, let's minimize crouch and add the new Sprint input action. And now we can use the Select Key feature to select the left Shift button. Let's go ahead and save that. Now let's go back to our third-person blueprint in the third-person/blueprints folder, and we're going to make a similar setup here, but for our sprint. So let's go ahead and right-click and type sprint, and use our input action for sprint. Let's expand this, and you'll see that we have our started and completed as well. So let's check out our character movement and see what we could adjust for our walk or run speed. So here we see that we have max walk speed is set to 500. So let's actually lower this to something like 400. Hit compile, and let's see what that looks like here. That's kind of a brisk walk, so let's slow it down even more. Let's set it to 250. Yeah, that looks like a normal walk. All right, so now what we want to do is go ahead and adjust this walk speed manually. So let's drag character movement in here and drag off of that component. And what doing this allows us to do is it'll allow us to change variables directly in this component. So if we drag off of this, and we're going to type set max walk speed, and we'll connect this to started. Let's change this to one of our original values, like 700, and hit compile. If we hit play, then we're walking slow, and when we hit shift, now we're running. But letting go of shift doesn't actually do anything. It just stays forever at this speed. So we need to change this back. So again, we'll drag off of character movement here and set that again. Or we can actually copy this with Control C and paste it with Control V. And under completed, connect it back here. Under the target, connect it back here. Now we can set the speed to 250 again and hit compile. Let's hit play. So we're walking slow, we hold shift and we're running, and then we let go and we're walking slow again. And we hold control and we're crouching, not visually, but you can see it crouching. And when we let go, we're walking again. When we hold shift, we're running again. So all of our movements are now working as expected aside from the animation itself. Now, how can we make this even easier to access? Let's go ahead and right click on max walk speed and promote this to a variable. So now we have a max walk speed variable. We'll hit compile and it's set to 700. We can do the same thing for the walk speed here. Promote this to a variable, and we'll have another variable for this one specifically. So since this is the, let's hit compile, this is the slow speed at 250, we can go ahead and rename this as walk speed. And then for this one here, since this is the run, we can rename this to run speed. And now all of this is connected to variables that are really easy to edit. So rather than going into our code, we can simply at any point click on run speed and simply change the speed to something else, and all of our code will automatically work with it. Let's hit play. We're running, we let go, we're walking. Perfect. So in the next video, we will set up our custom animations that we just downloaded. We'll set up state machines to deal with when the character is crouching, when they're walking and crouching, when they're not crouching and walking or running, things like that. And we will get that all added into the system. Let me know if you have any questions, ideas, suggestions on what way I want to take, or what way you want to take this series, because I just want to put together a game step by step. First thing I needed to do was deal with the character movement controller, so we started doing that. Next, I might add the animations, then weapons, then different types of weapons, projectiles, line casting, anything that you'd like to see in this series. Please let me know in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to add it in. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day. Peace.
From conversations to games to interviews with a broader view. He keeps it fresh, always brings something new. It's MikeTheTech, 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 the architect, MikeTheTech, MikeTheTech, yeah, MikeTheTech, the architect,